Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today's topic is the Baltic Dry Index. Michael, I've got no idea what you're talking about here, so I'm hoping you're going to enlighten me and the listeners.
Thanks, Dallas. Yeah, I had no idea this thing existed either until in 2008-09, the world financial media had this up for about a week to 2 weeks running. And what the Baltic Dry Index is, look, in simple terms, it actually measures shipping. Yep. Shipping
activity, basically.
Basically, shipping activity. How many ships? So the actual how many ships have actually been hired or engaged to ship goods?
Yep.
So the official explanation from as per Wikipedia is the Baltic Dry Index is issued daily by the London-based Baltic Exchange. The index is a composite of the Capesize, Panamax, and Supramax time charter averages, all big ships.
Yeah.
It is reported around the world as a proxy for dry bulk shipping stocks, as well as general shipping market bellwether. Yeah, love that word, bellwether.
So that's sort of like an index that people use to go how much shipping is occurring in the world.
It's exactly that, Dallas. Yeah. It's the Baltic Dry Index. It is an index for measuring how much shipping is occurring in the world. So it was terribly depressed in 2008-09 as the GFC unfolded. Yeah. Apparently no one had any money left to buy anything. Therefore, nothing was being shipped. Yeah. Now, I remember hearing this article. So we speak about financial media all the time. And to the listeners here, I would encourage you to view this episode as what we would call a lifeboat drill. Yeah. So at some stage in the future, you're going to hear of something from the financial media and you're going to panic or you're going to be encouraged to panic.
Yep.
And you're going to think, what is the relevance of this? Think back to this. Back to this podcast episode.
This is a great example because you would have been an advisor at the time, reading about all these things about the Baltic Dry Index and having clients contact you and say, "What about the Baltic Dry Index?" And you would have been going, "What are you talking about?" And googling it and finding it. What even is it?
Like, you just cannot make this stuff up.
Yeah.
So basically, back in 2008-09, I can't remember the exact time frame. It was before the bottom, but we'd had significant drops from memory.
Yeah.
And the financial media around the world had latched onto this thing that the Baltic Dry Index was significantly depressed.
Yeah.
No one was buying anything.
Yeah.
And the key thing and there's a sharp drop in goods being shipped around the world.
Yeah.
What they imply and what they expressly and implicitly say is that this is going to get much, much, much worse.
Yep.
And cut your losses and get out now. It's basically what they're saying. Cut your losses.
Yep.
Sell the companies that
are
shipping these goods.
Yep.
Are all going to suffer significant losses.
Yep.
And you are best served in cutting your losses now.
Yep.
They were down 20, 30, 40%. I can't remember at the time.
Yeah.
It was down significantly.
Yeah.
So what it got me to thinking, I was thinking at the time, what is the relevance of this thing? And so let's go back to 2008-09. We're recording this late in 2021. So if you're a 50-year-old back in 2008-09, trying to think about your retirement over the next 15 years, the next 10 to 15 years, you are now an aspiring retiree right now. You are approaching retirement age. You're either retired or you're getting ready to retire. If you had a $500,000 super balance back then, before the drop, And of course, we use examples here.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that figure, but if you had $500,000 of funds in super
Yep.
between a couple, let's say, and you had maybe some investments, if you had that before the drop, at the bottom of the global financial crisis, you had only $215,000 on paper. Now, what's happened since? Well, if you did nothing, what's happened is that you've recouped your initial loss of minus 57%. So your 500,000 dropped by $285,000 down to 215,000 right at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
If you did nothing, that was recouped within a few years.
Yep.
So your $285,000 had been made up. You were back to square. You were back to $500,000. What's happened since?
Yeah.
If you touched nothing, and this isn't even counting adding money in or anything like that, you've grown by another $1,066,000 over that period of time. That's a compound annual return of 10%.
Yep.
That's over that period of time.
That's a really interesting one, because if you said to someone, if you were 50 just before the GFC and you had 500,000 and your super balance dropped from 500,000 to 215, and you had to say to someone, what do you think your super balance would be at now, 13 years on? There's no way that you would guess 1.5 million.
No.
You know what I mean? There's just most people would go, you might be back to square one, you might be back at 500, or people might go, you've probably picked it back up and a bit extra. Maybe you're getting close to the $1 million mark.
Yeah.
No, it's not a natural thought to go, well, your 215 has now not just recovered the 500,000, but it's added an extra $1 million on top, and you're now at 1.5 million.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
And again, you asked the question, what is the relevance?
Yes.
Well, they say if you're a 50-year-old now, or even if you're older, but if you're using that same example, you're a 50-year-old now, or if you're 50-year-old in 2022, and something happens.
Yeah.
Something significant happens to cause
and this is
prices of your assets to fall by 57%.
Yeah.
I can tell you, it won't be the Baltic Dry Index. It'll be something else.
It'll be something else.
They'll make this stuff up. You cannot. You couldn't write this in a fantastical novel. Like the media will latch onto something. And they'll grab it and they'll say, "This is down. This is going to get much worse,
and it's never going to recover.
It's never going to recover. And get out now. Get out now."
Yeah, it's really interesting, that extrapolation, because it's, as you say, the Baltic Dry Index is one example of this. You see it all the time. Like, I remember we sat down having a coffee one day and we listed all of the crises that we'd seen in our time. Over the space of about 5 years, we just thought back the last 5 years, you could come up with 20 things. It was the fiscal cliff, QE easing, the Eurozone crisis, the Ebola, it was this, it was that, it was that, it was that. You list 20 things, and then you look at company price performance over the last 5 years, and it was just a fairly neat line, straight up, few little squiggles within there. It was bizarre to think that when we talk about, like I had this with a new client yesterday where I was saying, look, when things are going good, it's hard to imagine what the pressure will be on you to sell and to panic in those times, because we don't know what that's going to be about. We don't know what the next Baltic Dry Index is going to be. And so, if you look at it in the last 18 months, we've had coronavirus. And between February and March of last year, when we had, it was a very similar thing where there's this new virus out, it's a health crisis, and there's going to be, health crisis from that. There's going to be supply chain issues. There's going to be all this from this. Again, the same thing applies there. If you tried to follow that news along, and if you tried to, I'm going to get out and try and get back in, there's a very, very high likelihood of that you cost yourself a lot of money. Whereas if you just ignored that, if you'd been living out on a mine site in the middle of nowhere and hadn't seen the news for that 6 months, you would have got your superannuation statement as of the 1st of January, and then you got your next statement 6 months later. Your balance would be about the same. It's really, there was no, even over that 6 month window, there was no real change in your life. It's just that when you're living that every day, turning on the news, reading the paper, this is what's happened with company prices have done this, and China's going to do this, and the US is going to do this, and so I think that's the interesting one about these examples is we can laugh now about the Baltic Dry Index. Like what the hell? I've never even heard of that. It's ridiculous, and people can laugh at that because it's 13 years ago. But most people remember what it was like when COVID hit last year, and there was the health panic, but then there was also the panic of a lot of people about their super balances dropped from 500,000 to 350 or to 300, and what are we going to do? And I'm reading the newspaper and I'm just watching my balance drop all the time, and it's the same thing. Just because it's more recent or it's more tangible or pressing or whatever, we will look back in 15 years' time at the blip of the drop of 35% during COVID last year, and it'll be similar to the GFC. It'll be a thing where the lived experience of that was very scary, and was really confronting for a lot of people to watch this super balance drop. But if you just tuned it out, 15 years later, it was a blip on the radar. It was just nothing, and so
like you're spot on. So it seems absurd. You can anecdotally look at this and think, what's the Baltic Dry Index? What's the fact that goods aren't being shipped because people aren't spending money for that fraction of a moment in time? Yeah. What's the significant? Of course, it's not going to affect a 50-year-old. In their
15 years out from
15 years. It's not going to affect a 70-year-old that's already retired. It's not going to. People can say that. What I see when people are actually living it in the moment,
very different.
And again, that's where we come back to this. This is a lifeboat drill. This is actually practicing to put a plan in action when your ship is sinking. Metaphorically. So what it is, again, if you can remember back and listen to this podcast the next time there's significant volatility, or if you can think back, because it'll be something else. It'll be something else that's made up at that point in time. I was
just about to say, like, this is exactly one of those things where we'll listen to this podcast, and then the next, like I was talking to someone the other day who said, I've just read this article about what was it about? It was about energy usage in China. They were going, so there's provinces where there's not enough energy in China, and what does that mean? And that was the discussion was just about how does that play out now. Because prices have just kept going up, it was just an interesting intellectual exercise, and we were going, how will China meet their energy demands, and what will that do on commodity prices? And just again, a purely intellectual exercise. It has no bearing on your financial planning. Now, I guarantee you, though, that if that article came out at the same time that company prices dropped by 30%, it wouldn't just be, here's some interesting news out of China. It would be, because of the energy crisis in China, company prices have dropped by 30%. There's no way that they're ever going to be able to provide the infrastructure that they need to manufacture things. Therefore, companies' profits are going to go down. They're going to stay down forever, and you should panic and get out now. And that's exactly your point, is that I think when prices drop, we don't just go, prices have dropped. We look around and latch on to why would this be? And the Baltic Dry Index was just the thing at the moment that someone at a newspaper went, hey, this is kind of an interesting, cool sounding thing. Let's grab that and blame that or use that as the metric that we ultimately want to use.
And the financial media is ramming this down your throat. They're ramming this down your throat. Now, during coronavirus in February and March when that broke, there wasn't time for this information to be digested. So the financial media, they started, but there just wasn't time. It dropped
so quickly
and started to recover after about 5 weeks. There just wasn't time for people panicked, obviously. People panicked the price down by 37%. There wasn't the extended time for people, for a lot of people to panic. And B, most of the stories are actually on the health side of COVID-19. They weren't on the financial side. Global financial crisis was different. There was no health issue. It was all finance. In air quotes. Baltic Dry Index, Bear Stearns, fiscal cliff, all of those types of things. So people had the time, and we've just recently released a podcast where we spoke about the three levels of the global financial crisis. So the three drop and hold, big drop over a 2 week period, and then another drop, another huge drop,
and that's what
off the back of that. So
if you've got 18 months of prices dropping, you've got plenty of time to look around and find the thing. Oh yeah, the Baltic Dry Index. That's the thing that I need to.
This was the one that I'd forgotten. There's probably more. There'll be more. Like there was something new every week. Something new every week.
That was what was really interesting that day. We went through that. We just literally sat there and thought of all of the negative news stories that we'd heard. You know, the fiscal cliff. That was my favourite. You know, they always got great names. These things. The fiscal
cliff's a beauty because you just pictured Italy and Europe just going straight off the edge of this cliff. It was. I always joke: is there a Hall of Fame of journalists coming up with names like?
But it's a I think that, and the other thing that you realise, I guess, because we see all of these against our will, we see all of these news stories, and what I mean by that is, you know, if you every time there's not every time, but often when there's a latest negative news story, if you've got 100 clients, for example, there'll be some news story that piques the interest of each individual. And so I guarantee you that there would have been someone who got really interested in the Baltic Dry Index. So if you've got 100 clients, one person was really into that. The other 99 didn't even know it existed. They probably flipped over that article and thought nothing of it. It's often one of those things where these negative stories, they're portrayed in the media and even experienced, I think, for clients as this must be a big deal because I'm experiencing this as a big deal.
I remember having serious conversations with people who were concerned about this, and it was, well, how are my companies going to make profits if people aren't buying things and are never going to buy this? This is the implication: are never going to buy them again. I remember not defending it, but just saying, okay, well, logically, let's just play this through. Even if you choose not to buy something,
at some stage,
then things are going to wear out. So these were the conversations I was having. So things will wear out. So people have to replace those things. Hang on a sec. We know that as soon as the general public, before they even get the money, it burns a hole in their pocket.
They're going to spend it.
Now, there's periods of time throughout history, such as the global financial crisis, where what happens people don't set fire to money. No. Money does not get raked up and set alight. It goes into hiding for a period of time. So no one's raking up trillions of dollars of cash and setting it alight. What's happening is people are holding on to it. Now, if I hold on to cash, I've got more to spend next year or the year after, and it comes out. It does come back out. So, I mean, I'm happy to say that the poor Baltic Dry Index is back to normal. It's back to its normal levels.
I was about to say, is there a measure? Yeah, right.
And you can't see it. We've got the index in front of us. Have a look at if you've got the time. Just jump onto Wikipedia and have a look. What you'll notice is that in 2005, 2006 and 2007,
it went mad.
This thing just went mad. Like people were spending money. Hand over fist before that, and they effectively run out of money. And from the top to the bottom, it does look like it is a significant sharp fall. And again, in simple terms, that's what I like to say. If people are going through a spending spree, and they're spending more than they usually do, then I mean, sooner or later that money runs out. And there's a year where they don't have, where they can't spend because there's no equity left, or there's no cash left. Or
the thing that jumps out at me is this graph as well, because I'm already thinking that the next thing that people would be thinking is, well, this is an easy game. Why don't we just track the Baltic Dry Index, and then when it drops, we'll know that that's because people aren't buying things. And it's again one of those things where you go, I'm trying to imagine now, you 13 years ago, 14 years ago, someone coming in saying, hey, company prices have dropped by 30%. Here's this Baltic Dry Index. No one's buying any goods. And so if you look at where the index dropped, the price of companies had already dropped by 30-40% at that point in time. By the time this was news,
Absolutely.
it was already. So it was again one of those, and you see this all the time where people are going, "Hey, I read this thing in the news. Prices have either dropped in, and it's normally after prices have already dropped. So prices have dropped. I've read this thing in the news that it's because of X, Y, or Z. Should I get out now?" It's kind of those things where you go, like, if you can read the news article, or if you know a month in advance, or if you know 6 months in advance, then great. But if you're reading about it in the paper, by its very nature, you're only reading information that's available to everyone. That information is already priced in.
It's already priced in.
So it's too late. And I think the other part of it is when you see these, because again, we're pattern-making machines, human beings. So we look at the Baltic Dry Index and go, oh, it actually, you look throughout the GFC and it follows pretty neatly, that drop of company prices. Now, if you look back from 2003 to 1985, it's very sort of consistent throughout that time. At times where there were other huge drops, there was the dot-com crash, there's the 87 crash. There's no spike in this. So it's kind of one of those things where you go, when this was newsworthy in the GFC, when it was this is a big deal because it's changed.
Yeah.
If you actually looked back at other drops throughout recent history, you'd kind of very quickly go, oh, well, this doesn't line up with any of that stuff. And that's kind of how it works, is that these patterns only, it's like when you look at the cloud and see a rabbit. You look at the cloud and see a rabbit. It doesn't mean that the cloud is a rabbit. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a thing that we have noticed in the clouds. So, yeah, the other thing I made notes myself around this that you just discussed is there are two conversations that I reckon we have over and over again about these sorts of things with clients. So the first thing that you sort of say is people come in and go, hey, I read this thing in the news the other day that the Baltic Dry Index has dropped significantly, or the Eurozone, there's a public debt crisis in Greece, or there's something like that. And after a while, your first response just becomes yes, because by its nature, people are, I think, kind of expecting you to disagree with that, or to argue with you about the Baltic Dry Index, or the Eurozone crisis, or the this or that, and you realise over time that you just can't get into the weeds on the Baltic Dry Index, because so your response is yes, the Baltic Dry Index has dropped apparently, because I now know what it is and I've just Googled it, and yeah, okay, sure, it has. The next response to that is, well then what? What do we do with that information? So given that prices have already dropped by 30%, or that prices haven't dropped yet, what are we proposing to do with this information, or with this latest apocalypse that's happening of the Baltic Dry Index, or the whatever, what do you propose we do? Well, why don't we get out and wait until things settle down? Okay, well, if we do that and prices don't drop, or if prices rebound back from where they are, or if everything gets a bit more expensive, at what point do we accept that we were wrong and buy back in at a higher price? And as soon as you start to make this conversation about what can we do with this information, people seem to activate the other part of their brain, which is the rational planning part of it. Go, well, okay, if the Baltic Dry Index is this bellwether of things and prices already dropped by 30%, I kind of have to try and get out now, even though prices are already down by 30%, and then I have to. I know that I'm 50 and I'm not retiring for another 15 years. I know I need to buy back in at some point. So when would that? Am I going to use the Baltic Dry Index as the marker for that, or how will I know when to get back in? So as soon as you make it a thing where you go, it's a yes and conversation. So yes, that is all true, and what do we do with that? Not a, well, actually, the Baltic Dry Index doesn't matter because it measures only supramax, yachts and not other shipping that happens violently. The minute you get into the weeds on that, you've sort of missed the point, which is, regardless of all this really interesting stuff that you learn about, like the Baltic Dry Index, it just has no bearing on how you should be planning, or the choices you should be making about how your superannuation money is invested for the long term.
And we have what we think is a much better plan, which is sticking to the plan during those periods of time, not spending your time reading the news, sticking to the plan. Yeah. And it's definitely easier on your it's definitely it doesn't take as much toll on your emotions, on your stress levels, or emotional levels,
or on your super balance. So I think it's a very interesting one. I've learned something new for the day. So this is one of those things where we say to people, this is a bit like an SBS movie, because we say to people, okay, well, now today you've learned about the Baltic Dry Index.
The conclusion here is, it's like I said, it's a lifeboat drill. We talk about lifeboat drills. We haven't mentioned that term for a while.
Yeah.
We're telling you about this when things are good. These are the good times.
It's 13 years on from the Baltic Dry Index.
In 2022 or 23 or 24 or 25 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There will be a stage when things are down, and they will stay down for a period of time, and you'll be questioning.
Yes.
People question.
Yeah.
Look, I can understand it all, but I just can't handle it. I just can't handle it anymore. Now, think of this and remember back to this. Yeah. This is just one of the one of the many. And that's one of the many lifeboat drills that we do. Probably every third podcast is on volatility and what to do, and people are probably listening, and some people may be tuning out and thinking, gee, these guys just never shut up. It's going to come at some stage. It's a naturally occurring thing. Yeah, a drop of over 30% tends to happen roughly every 5 to 6 years. So that 2020 was nothing, because it just happened so quickly. Yeah. And as people were starting to think they might panic, hey, it's turned around and bounced 10%. We labour the point. Labour the point because of the fact that you can do all this good work. You can do all this good work, and you can unwind it in a second. By making the wrong choice. When you feel that you just can't hold on anymore, because it's been 18 months and 57% down, or 20 months and 40% down, or whatever it is, whatever that iteration is going to be the next time.
And I think that's a great point, because this is the example, this is the drill. Now, the names will change, if that makes sense. So if we've just used that in an example of, if you're a 50-year-old just before the GFC and you had 500,000 in super, and it dropped to 215, and it's now recovered to 1.5. The numbers and the names and the news article will change. So you're probably never going to hear about the Baltic Dry Index again. However, when those prices do drop, it might not go from 500 to 215. It might go from 500 to 300,000, and you might not be 50. You might be 57, or you might be 61. The point remains the same. Just insert the relevant drops in those prices and insert the relevant news articles. So it's probably not the Baltic Dry Index. It might be the energy crisis in China, or it might be I don't know, some legislation coming out of America, or it might be something. So you basically insert the price drop and insert the news article, and the concept stays the same, which is that you cannot make investment decisions based on that financial news. You cannot try and time when to get out and get back in. You have to just stick to the plan, stay invested the whole way through. And the names will change, but the concept stays the same.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 financial advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.